Welcome to Diasporaa, the show where we share the remarkable stories of immigrants from the Indian subcontinent. I'm your host, Aditya Mehta, and each week we sit down with individuals who have made the journey over and explore their experiences, their challenges, their triumphs. We delve into their unique perspectives on adapting to a new culture while staying connected to their roots. Today we are joined by Imroz Rupani. Originally from Bombay, he moved to Vancouver, BC in 1998 at the age of 16. He went to school in Prince George, BC, and eventually became a CFA, so a chartered financial analyst. He's had a series of different businesses he's worked in and currently owns a group of liquor stores in the Greater Vancouver area. So lots to unpack there. I know Imroz from my very early days in Vancouver, and he and his wife Alicia are one of our closest friends in Vancouver even now. It was that group of friends that really got us settled in the country and helped us grow and assimilate quickly. So, with that, let's dive into this week's conversation. Imroz, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure. I appreciate it.
So, what part of Bombay are you from?
I'm an original Bandra boy. I was born and brought up in Bandra, and
Okay.
literally that was my oasis, my little well. I didn't really leave Bandra much.
Yeah. Tell people about Bandra and what's so special about Bandra as a suburb.
I mean, Bandra is very different than some of the other suburbs too. Like it's right on the sea face. We have a lot of Bollywood stars that live there.
Yeah.
In fact, I am a ex-Stanislaus, so I went to Saint Stanislaus High School. Some of the more renowned alumni include Salman Khan and a singer Shan
Yeah.
for people who follow Bollywood.
Yeah. Yeah. Salman Khan is a famous Bollywood actor, for more context for our listeners. And he's one of the three Khans who I think in the 90s and 2000s were like the biggest stars in Bollywood. I also think Bandra is one of those very cosmopolitan parts of the city in the sense there's a large Christian population. Some parts of Bandra resemble like, like Goa or like even a Portuguese town. And then there's a Muslim population and a Hindu population. Like where I grew up in Borivali, it was very Gujarati neighborhood. And then I moved to South Bombay. Our building was a very Gujarati building. So I, as a person from South Bombay, refused to go to Bandra. And it's a thing in Bombay for our listeners that people from the South Bombay, which is like the old city, they're called townies because they live in downtown. And the suburb people are called, the suburbs. And there's always this kind of fun thing between the townies and the people from the suburbs, like which one's really better. But Bandra is probably the queen of the suburbs, I would say. If I were to live in the suburbs, I would live in Bandra.
So for me, Bombay ends at Mahim
Yeah,
and at Khar. That's it. That's my Bombay.
yeah,
I don't cross Mahim Causeway and I don't go past Khar. And one things that I didn't mention about Bandra are the small lanes with these old houses. So, and a lot of these were old Parsi homes owned by Parsi families. They are still around. Unfortunately, the owners have passed away. There's no survivors who can
yeah,
inherit the place. But these really quaint looking, really nice small streets,
yeah. Oh, yeah.
cafes.
And recently there's been like a street art project, and lots of murals are all over these small streets, and it like Bollywood and other pop culture references, and it looks really beautiful. I'm gonna add links to the in the show notes for the Bandra art project if I can find it. So, what made you decide to move to Canada?
In my early days, actually, I've always had a family abroad. So my dad's brother and my mom's brother both lived in the US. And in the 90s, everybody wanted to move to the US. A member from each family was in the US. I had friends at a young age that moved to the US.
Yeah,
So I really wanted to visit the US. And once I did get there, and I was blown away, I really loved it. Like I went to Atlanta, New York, Chicago. That was my idea. And so when I got back, I just briefly mentioned to my dad, I mean, this is probably, I was 14 years, 13, 14 years old. And I
yeah,
mentioned to my dad, hey, I know that immigrating to the US is not an option, but I hear Canada is very similar and maybe we can try for that. And that
yeah.
was it. That was the only conversation I had with my dad. And next thing I know, a few years later, we're being called, my dad is appearing for his PR interview. And so my dad really took that conversation to heart
Yeah,
from a 14-year-old.
yeah. What was the PR process like back then?
Oh, it was interesting. So the wait times in India were still pretty long. So he put an application through and he was called in for an interview and he had an option to go either to Europe or to Sri Lanka for an interview because the wait times were
Oh,
less. So yeah, he had an attorney guiding him through it, an immigration lawyer, and he went to Sri Lanka and they actually did a personal interview for him. And yeah, and we got our PR and literally went for our medicals, and landed in Canada as landed immigrants with a big document back in the day that you got. I don't know if you guys, they don't issue those anymore, but they're called landing documents that you attach
Mm-hmm.
to your passport.
Okay. No, nothing that is attached to the passport these days, but you do get a COPR, confirmation of PR, I think. Nice. So you landed up in Canada and you were, I guess, 16. So you had a little bit of high school left, I'm guessing.
Yeah, so I moved here in 98, and my idea for Canada was just the idea of the US that I'd seen. I had no idea. We
Hmm.
didn't have Google back then, so I hadn't
Yeah.
seen pictures of Vancouver either. So I really
Yeah.
did not know what I was getting into. We did not have any family in Vancouver either.
Yeah.
We didn't know anybody, just an acquaintance who booked us an apartment. And we literally landed here and got our suitcases into the apartment, and it was an empty apartment.
Yeah. Sounds
Literally
funny.
walked over to Walmart, picked up some
Yeah.
pillows and blankets, and slept that night.
Yeah.
But yeah, so a couple of days later, after we got over the jet lag, my dad took me to the my high school and got me enrolled. Had to take an English assessment test,
Sure.
and yeah, so I did part of grade 11 and most of grade 12 here.
Yeah.
It was
What
interesting.
made you decide to move to Vancouver and not Toronto like most new immigrants do?
So my dad did some research at that time, and he just found the weather was a predominant reason. That I
Yeah.
know most people from India moved to Toronto,
Yeah.
but because the weather was more moderate, my parents decided to come to Vancouver.
Sure. How was the first few days of high school like? Did you integrate pretty easily?
No, it was extremely challenging integrating into high school. You get bullied a lot, you get made fun of a lot. So this is
Yeah.
more so for, I mean, for your listeners, as I'm sure maybe they have kids. So this
Yeah.
is for parents. Like, your children are going to experience a lot of challenges when they go to school here. Yeah, I eventually did make three friends in all the 2 years that I was here. I made three friends in high school,
Yeah.
and I played basketball with them. It was a bit of a grind, to be honest.
Yeah. Did you have any cultural issues like, in India you stand up and talk to the teacher, things
Yeah,
like that?
the funniest thing happened. So the first day in high school, the first class I attended was mathematics
Mhm.
in the morning, and I get in there, and they have those chairs with the armrests, so you can write on them.
Yeah.
And so I sat there. The teacher walked into the class and said, "Oh, we have a new student in the class, and why don't you introduce yourself?" So, like a proper good boy, I stood up and struggled to stand up with the armrest and almost knocked
Yeah.
the chair over. And I
Yeah.
introduced myself. And it turns out that apparently that was absolutely unnecessary. And I could have
Right.
just easily sat there. My teacher's like, "Oh, you don't have to stand up. You can
Yeah.
just sit there and tell us about yourself." That was interesting. I wasn't
Yeah.
expecting that.
It's common in societies with high power distance like India where you stand up and talk to the teacher. I've had a guest from Dehradun and a guest originally from Kerala. Both had the exact same experience when they moved in high school. What made you go to Prince George of all places to study?
So after I finished grade 12, I was a,
Actually,
yeah.
tell people what Prince George is because I don't think most people would know.
So Prince George is a city in the north of Vancouver, about an 8 hour drive. And it's basically a university town. All there is a pulp mill, a lumber mill, and a university. That's it. And it has a population, or it had a population of 55,000. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So most students, most people there were either employed in the lumber mill or they were
Hmm.
students.
Yeah.
So I didn't know about this place. And after I finished grade 12, I was a very average student. I got my provincial grades back, like from my provincial exams. And this is back in the late 90s where computer science was in vogue. And I wanted to be a computer scientist or a software engineer. So I applied at UBC, SFU, BCIT, and then somebody told me about this university that I should try up in Prince George. I'm like, okay, well, it doesn't hurt. I'll try.
Sure.
So I got rejected from all the other universities, but I got into UNBC. So
Right.
I just packed up my stuff, and I had no idea what I was getting into. I packed up my car, and my dad and I drove up to UNBC to check it out,
Wow.
and we got there, and the rest is history.
Good time to be studying computer science then, or
Oh, it was a great time until the big stock. I mean, not the stock, but yeah, the tech
com
bubble
bubble?
burst. My timing is impeccable with certain things. I started off as a computer science major, and while I was studying that, the tech bubble burst in 1999. Well, it worked out well for me because it turns out I did not have an aptitude for computers either.
Okay.
So I ended up switching to finance.
So let's talk about that. What was your like first job outside of college as a computer science major if the tech bubble had burst?
So during university, I would always go back home because in the summers or in the winter break,
Hmm.
my parents had a gas station up in Whistler, and I would just go there and help out when I wasn't at university. So I spent my summer and winter break working at my parents' gas station, helping out with my family business.
Yeah. Um, in India, there's less dignity in labor than it is here. Like here, if your server is going to introduce themselves and you say hi, in India, you'll say, "Why are you telling me your name?" So, was there any kind of like internal mental block for you, or it was your family business, so you didn't think of it that
No,
way?
there definitely was. Like, I was scheduled to work just like any other employee. I
Yeah,
was given a schedule. Obviously, I was asked for my preference as to what schedule I would like to work, just
yeah,
like any other employee would be. You can't force anybody to work a schedule they don't want to.
yeah,
But I did all the duties that went along with the job. So I've done everything from cleaning the toilets to filling gas in cars, checking oils, cleaning the windshield. So
yeah,
ground up, I got no special treatment.
yeah.
And that mental block that I might have had went away very quickly.
Yeah, I joined my family business in India, and my first job was door to door mutual fund sales. So, totally get it. We were a pretty large company, and the news spread very quickly that I was the boss's son. So, I got special treatment whether I liked it or not. But as far as my boss went, he actually was extra hard on me because he wanted to show everybody that he's not favoring me. So, I got the short end of the stick in that sense. And so after you did that and you finished your degree, what came next for you?
After I finished my degree, I worked in retail banking for a little while because it was tough even back in those days to get jobs after as a new graduate. I did eventually get a job working in one of the big six banks in retail.
Yeah.
But my objective was always to get into either capital markets or asset management. So
Mm-hmm.
I pursued my CFA and I've passed all three levels. But my luck that, as soon as I finished my CFA in 2009, right in the middle of the financial crisis,
Yeah.
just like my tech bubble situation.
Yeah. So again, impeccable timing.
Yeah, it was very difficult to find a job in the fields that I wanted.
Yeah. Did you find a challenge getting a job due to you being new in the country at all? Or did the being from a Canadian university kind of take care of that problem? Because a lot of people get asked, do you have Canadian experience?
Yeah, I did not have that issue because having graduated from a Canadian high school and a Canadian
Right.
university, I was just treated like any other Canadian graduate, right?
Right.
So I did not face that challenge in particular.
Okay. That makes sense. So then you finish your CFA, but I guess you never practiced as a
No,
CFA.
I never worked in the industry. And in order to get your charter, you have to work in the
Right,
industry for 4 years.
right.
I never ended up getting my charter, so I can't refer to myself as a charter holder.
As a CFA, right. I was doing my CFA around the same time, and I think part of it was, percentile based. And in this 2008-9 time, so many people went and did the CFA because there was no opportunity cost. Your career is not going to go anywhere if you take time off anyways in
Yeah.
finance. And I didn't pass the level 2 twice, and then I kind of gave up, but I did the CAIA instead, which is the Chartered Alternative Investment Analyst. So I'm a CAIA charter holder. I have been one since I think 2014. It's the little brother of the CFA, and it covers the non-traditional asset classes like real estate and commodities, stuff like
So
that.
CFA level 2, I think, is the toughest exam. I had to take it
Yes.
twice myself.
Yes.
Level 1 and level 3, I passed in one shot, but level
Yeah.
2, I had to take that twice
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah, it is. Of course, I retained what I learned, and that has been immensely helpful in life in general. Time value of money and compounding. I think not enough people are taught that even in high school, right? Financial literacy. Okay, that makes sense. So then you didn't actually work in that profession. Did you? Is that when you started your first business or your
Not
current
quite.
business?
Actually, I did. Yeah, I kind of did, but I did struggle a little bit. I did go to India as well for a little while just to see if I could possibly find a job there in finance. I figured that it might be a bit easier,
Yeah.
but I had no luck over there. And so once I came back, I decided that, it's now time to get serious about life.
So, what challenges did you face in India while getting a job? Because it was not as affected in the 2008 financial crisis as the US was.
No, and you're right about that. So, but what happened was after I graduated university with a degree in finance in 2005, I was visiting India and I just thought, while I'm there, I could probably just try and see if I could find a job and stick around for a little while.
Hmm.
And back in that time, it was so easy. I got a job, like first interview that I went to, I got a job, and I decided that, you know what, I don't think I can deal with the daily grind in Bombay. So I didn't take that job and I went back. And that experience stuck in my mind. So in 2009, when I was finding it challenging, I decided, after trying in Canada for a while, I decided, okay, maybe I should try India since it was so easy the first time around.
Yeah.
So I went there, and this time things were significantly different. So I did go in for a whole bunch of interviews. Anytime I went in at interviews, I guess there was, in a sense, there was a culture shock when I was there. Just the way how India actually works, it was very different than what I'm
Yeah.
used to.
Yeah.
And also the fact that I was from Canada and had studied abroad, there was a reverse discrimination in the sense that they were of the opinion, oh, he probably doesn't know enough about the local markets.
Right.
And he has no Indian experience.
Right. Yeah. How in Canada they say you don't have Canadian experience. It was the other way around. Interesting. I completed my bachelor's degree and went back to India. And when I looked for a job, people didn't, because everything depends on your degree in India. If you're a bachelor's degree, this is what you make. Because none of the degrees are really teaching you anything to be employable. So it's just the basis for your salary. And people didn't know what to make of this undergrad from University of Texas. So they said, we're going to treat you like a BCom, bachelor's in commerce, which doesn't pay very well at all. And I struggled with that to some extent as well. So let's take a break now. And when we return, we'll continue talking to Imroz about his entrepreneur life and also some interesting things about his life in Vancouver. So we'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back to Diasporaa on KKNW, where we share interesting stories of first generation immigrants from the Indian subcontinent. We're talking to Imroz Rupani, investor, business owner, and my dear friend. But before we get back to talking to Imroz, I want to take a moment to remind you to subscribe to our channel on YouTube. You can find all our episodes right from the first episode in video format there. So, Imroz, you said you made 3 friends in high school. What other avenues did you end up using to make more friends?
I did. So it was actually, I'll take you a little bit further back. So when I got here from Bombay, a city of 10 million people. At that time, it was probably 10, 12 million people. And, so many people on the road everywhere all the time.
Yeah,
And I moved to Vancouver, which was a sleepy little hamlet of
yeah,
like maybe 2 million people if you include all of Vancouver and the suburbs.
yeah.
So I got here in the middle of winter. It was
Mm-hmm.
February, and it was miserable and it rained all the time and it was gloomy. So I was extremely sad. Like I really didn't want to be around anymore. But as the weather improved, April rolled around and I learned that there's cricket being played in Vancouver.
Mm-hmm.
So I found out about the fact that there was a community, Ismaili community. We had a cricket team. So I showed up. I was told that there's cricket practice at 5 p.m. on a Tuesday. So I got there and I'm looking around and there are a few people waiting over there. And I introduced myself to these people. And like, next question I asked them is, where are the floodlights? I don't see any floodlights.
Right.
And that was a joke because I didn't realize that like in April, that sun doesn't set till like 8:39.
Yeah.
And I'm being from Bombay and never experienced the summer in Vancouver.
Yeah.
Bombay sunsets like 6:15, 6:30
And
latest.
and there's not much variation between summer and winter either.
No, there isn't.
Yeah.
So I did not expect, and I obviously didn't notice the last few days the sun wasn't setting till like 8
Right.
8:30. So I'm like, how are you going to see the ball? There's no floodlights, and
Yeah.
everybody just cracked up.
Yeah.
And that's how I made friends. So
Yeah.
I started making friends at cricket.
And so you've been playing cricket regularly in these leagues for, I guess, what, 15, 20 years now?
Yeah, since '98. But I did take a bit of an injury layoff. I ended up taking like a 7 year injury layoff, maybe a bit
Okay.
longer. But yeah, I got back into cricket in 2017 again.
Okay. Tell me more about these leagues. Are these like semi-professional? Are they amateur? What happens to the team that wins the league?
So I play in the British Columbia Mainland Cricket League, which is
Okay.
BCMCL, and this league now has about 11 divisions or more.
Wow.
Yeah, I play in the sixth division. It's all amateur. We all show up on the weekend pretending that Virat Kohli and Shoaib Akhtar, but yeah, we're all amateurs. In our minds, we're professionals.
More context for our listeners. Virat Kohli is one of the greatest batsmen in cricket. He plays for India. Shoaib Akhtar is one of the great bowlers or pitchers, and he plays for Pakistan. And he was one of the first to hit the, I think, 100 mile an hour speed in at the speed at which the ball is thrown. Virat Kohli recently retired from Test cricket. A lot of people were upset about that. So I had a similar experience. I was the founder of the Longhorn Cricket Club in UT Austin when I was in college. It grew to become one of the biggest university cricket clubs in the US. We had at 1.400 paid members, and we played in the Central Texas Cricket League. And I think it was our first or second, very early seasons. It was just A and B. There was not 11 divisions. We won the B division as a student team, and we were the only student team. And I thought, I'm like this awesome player, left arm medium fast bowler. And then I go back to India and realize I'm really bad at cricket because the level is just so different in India. So these are not leagues that kind of technically your team could go up all the way to like at some national league level or
No, so the objective is for your team to win your division. So the top two teams in the division move to the
okay,
division up above,
okay,
and the bottom two teams go to the division below.
sure,
So your objective is to try and move up the division if you're good enough. But we
sure.
play in a dad's army. My team is the dad's army. Our average age is 43. We're just happy playing in the sixth division, and that
Yeah.
we can maintain the sixth division.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I know we've talked about me showing up for some of those, but I think I'm, even though I would be eligible for a dad's team, but I think my fitness level doesn't support that anymore. Especially bowling, right? You need to be fitter. I was a last man batsman, like going in at number 11. So never really got into batting as such. Okay. So pretty active cricket scene then. Is the Cricket League of Canada well followed? Like you have IPL in India, which is obviously the biggest one.
So the biggest league that we have in Canada is the Global GT20. It's called the
Yeah.
Global T20. I'm not sure. It seems like a very sketchy league, to be honest. I think it's more so for betting than for anything else.
Right.
It's not that well followed even in Canada.
Yeah. So in the US, they launched Major League Cricket, and this year is going to be the third season. And the teams are owned by larger franchisees from India and I think Australia. The team for New York is called MI New York, which is Mumbai Indians New York. Or you have the Texas Super Kings, like you have the Chennai Super Kings, and the LA Knight Riders, like you have the Calcutta Knight
Okay.
Riders.
Yeah.
Yeah, so as a result, they're sending their players here. So, like Kyron Pollard from the West Indies played in the New York team. So, the average level has been quite good, and the matches have been followed. I mean, I would term it as a success, given that they're coming back for more seasons. They're building stadiums for it. And I think the T20 World Cup in the US last year was a big a boost to just cricket's popularity, and I think all the news channels covered when US beat Pakistan, but I don't think
That was a big upset.
most Americans realize how big an upset that was.
Yeah.
It's like, Indian soccer team beating like France or something, right? Like it doesn't happen in cricket. So
Are they building a stadium in Seattle too? I think they are. I believe they are, right?
there's rumors that the Seattle Orcas are the local cricket team and they made it to the final of this first season. But until now, there was just the one stadium in Arlington, Texas, and one more in North Carolina. So there's been talk. I'm not familiar with any kind of verified news that it's coming or when it's
I
coming.
would drive down to Seattle to watch cricket.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, for the India Pakistan game, it was a pop up stadium in Queens, New York, and the tickets were going for $2,000. So
Oh, I know.
clearly, there's full interest in cricket. It's just not outside the South Asian diaspora yet, I would say. Okay, you mentioned that you joined the Ismaili cricket team. Tell me more about the Ismaili community. Like, just where does the community originate from, and just a brief kind of crash course on the community.
So Ismailis are spread out all over the world,
Yeah.
and there are Ismailis in Tajikistan, Afghanistan, India. When I say India, I mean the Indian subcontinent. So culturally, we are very diverse, and until quite recently, I mean, the history can go back as far as we want to go back to, but so we call them Jamaats. So communities called the Jamaat. So the Jamaat actually kind of got into contact with each other and the Imam, like after the communist, after the Berlin Wall fell. So
Hmm.
that's when a lot of the Ismailis that were in the communist controlled parts of the world got into touch with the Ismailis in the subcontinent. But a lot of the Ismailis in Africa, they're originally from Gujarat. So
Yeah.
families from Gujarat immigrated to Africa, East Africa, and also to Burma. And in 1970s, when there was unrest in East Africa, Idi Amin, the Imam then actually helped the Ismailis to move all over the world. And he was really good friends with Pierre Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada at that time. A lot of evacuation planes flew. A lot of Ismailis were airlifted to Canada at that point, and that's in 1970s is when Ismailis actually immigrated to Canada and made Canada their home. So Ismaili community has been in Canada since 1970s.
So it's a sect of Islam, but
Yeah, it's a branch
where
of Islam, Shia Islam.
of Shia Islam, and where did it originate? Like, what is India the home of Ismailis, or
Well,
there's no
now
real?
we have a big population in India. We have a big Jamaat in India, but
Yeah.
originally the Imams are from Persia.
Okay. Yeah, that's the major Shia Muslim country, anyways, right?
Yeah.
Iran. Okay. Interesting. So yeah, that was gonna be my next question. That the ones in say Tajikistan or Afghanistan, they're not ethnically Indian. They're ethnically locals, but they
Yeah.
follow the same. Yeah, because with Hindus, India and Hinduism is kind of synonymous in a way. Like there's not too many Hindu countries outside of India, right? Like there's Nepal and there's maybe Fiji, but
I've actually met a few. I mean, in Bali, there's a big, significant
yeah,
Hindu population, and they're not
yeah.
ethnically Indian either.
Yeah, yeah, true. I meant like it's not as widespread as say Islam is, right? In terms of number of countries that share a religion, despite being very different ethnically and linguistically.
So I wasn't aware of the cultural diversity that Ismailis had even until 1992. So I was only
Okay,
probably 11 years old when I realized there are Ismailis that didn't look like me.
right. Okay. The Ismaili community in at least in Vancouver where I see them has done quite well, and they're known for being a very close-knit community and also philanthropic and kind of being good citizens of the country. So, yeah, I come across Ismailis here and there, but you're my primary source of reference.
Yeah, so Ismaili community is very tight knit, and I think they've done really well for themselves in this country, especially having been here since 1972. They've had
Yeah,
a long enough time, and they've got deep roots now.
yeah,
And the culture, and I'm very impressed to learn about the Ismaili communities in Vancouver because I don't think it is the same back home. Because they are very welcoming of other Ismailis that come and they really help out and
yeah,
try and get these people on their feet. And if no matter if you're a new immigrant as an economic immigrant or if you're a refugee coming from Afghanistan or Tajikistan,
right.
there's always help and support around. If you're not Ismailis as well, but predominantly for the Ismaili
Yeah,
Jamaat,
yeah,
and yeah, and seva is a big part of our culture, so we'll do even community. So our Jamaat Khanas are also open for community events, like our
right.
Jamaat Khana on Canada Way in Burnaby
So
is
Jamaat Khana is the mosque, right?
that's
Or
right, our prayer. So it's also open for community events. I think we've had political events happen there, like we've had speeches, and we also have different community events like arts and coloring and just other stuff. It's an
yeah,
earthquake proof building, so it's earthquake gathering place if there was an earthquake for the
right,
neighborhood.
right. The fact that they help the community and each other and new immigrants, is that one of the reasons for the success of the community here, or and are there other reasons you feel the community's been successful?
I One of the reasons is that a lot of Ismailis were very successful even when they were in Africa before they moved here, and
Right,
some of them were able to bring their wealth with them.
right.
But so they had a good start. But just having a good start is not sufficient. Yeah, I think the support system here for new immigrants is definitely a key reason that the community is doing as well as it is today.
Okay. Are there any businesses people would know that are Ismaili owned, like popular or well known?
So the most, well, least most favorite well-known people, and you would not know them, but they own the Park Royal Mall.
Okay.
They own them all. The Larco Group, Lalji family, they're extremely well off, and they're a Ismaili family. But that's the most wealthy family that I know of.
Okay. Good stuff. So after you did your CFA and you weren't able to find a job in finance, at what point did you decide to start your own business? How much was the time frame in between?
Essentially, it wasn't too long. I got back from India in maybe August of 2011, and by February of 2012, I had already purchased my first business. We had already acquired it. Yeah.
Let's talk about that. How did you decide what business to buy, and did you have funds available like friends and family funding? Did you have to go through the bank loan process? Because as a new immigrant, that's pretty a challenging thing to. I mean, you were not new at that point, but for someone doing it for the first time, it can be pretty challenging.
So, yeah, we had a criteria in mind. We wanted to have a business where I wasn't just buying myself a job. It had to be a business that I could
Yeah,
scale up
yeah,
using managers, right? That was one of the criteria. Second criteria was it should be capital intensive. And there should be, the third criteria was there should be some barriers to entry. So once we had this criteria set, we started identifying businesses that met this criteria. So when after discussing this with several business brokers, acquaintances, we
yeah.
narrowed it down to either liquor stores or auto plan. Right?
Okay.
These were the two businesses that met our requirement.
So for our listeners, Autoplan is the car insurance that is run by the state or the province of BC, and that's the only car insurance provider in BC, and you can buy an agency of that. I get the barriers of entry and the scalability, but why capital intensive?
Capital intensive also adds a barrier to entry,
Right.
and it needed to be at a significant scale. So it needed to have significant capital investments as well.
Okay.
That was one of the reasons. And we needed to make sure that banks would finance the business.
Right. So it was a conventional, well understood, well known business and not something very difficult for a conventional lender to fund.
Right. And once we identified that, we started talking to people in our community, in the Ismaili community, and we were meeting different people. And we ended up meeting this one Ismaili family that had multiple liquor stores. Somebody said, just go talk to them, get their advice, get their opinion, see what they have to say about the business. So
Yeah.
we went there, and my dad and I, and we had a conversation with the patriarch of the family.
Yeah.
And after we were done having the conversation, the following day, they called us and said, "Hey, I know you guys are interested in the business, learning about the business. We would like to sell one of our stores. Would you be interested in purchasing it?"
Yeah.
So we grabbed onto that opportunity with both hands. And yeah, so back to your question about the financing aspect of it. So I did get help from my family. So my dad did send me seed money for the business,
Sure.
and then we borrowed against my parents' home as well. And in addition to that, we got a bank loan. So, and sure enough, I became a liquor store Indian as per Nimesh Patel.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm at the bottom of the hierarchy of the Indians.
I wouldn't say that. But yeah, I've seen that Nimesh Patel joke about the liquor store Indian. I'm
Yeah,
gonna
so at
find,
the top of
yeah,
the pyramid is the doctor, then there's the engineer, and
yeah.
then the bottom is Johnny Walker Patel.
Yeah, I remember that. I'm gonna find that video and put a link in the show notes for our listeners
Yeah,
and
I'm gonna
viewers
send
to
his hand
watch.
to school with merch, with liquor store
with,
merch.
with liquor store. That's hilarious. Okay, so let's take a break now. And when we come back, we can talk more about growing the business, the challenges that you faced in there, and any advice you might have for other new immigrants. So we'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back to Diaspora on KKNW, where we share interesting stories of first generation immigrants from South Asia. We're talking to Imroz Rupani, a business owner, cricket player, supposedly good cricket player, and my dear friend. Before we jump back into the conversation, if you like listening to our show, please consider following us on Instagram or leaving us a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcast. So, Imroz, talking about the business, I know your dad is a business owner in India. Did you ever have any exposure to that business while you were growing up?
Just from, when I'd hear him talk over the phone,
Yeah.
he'd be talking to his business associates. Also, from time to time, when he wants to share a few things with me growing up. But it was made very clear to me growing up that I wasn't going to be a part of his business. I'm not sure what the reason was. And I
Okay.
actually took that to heart.
The reason I asked that question is, how different is doing business in Canada versus India, if you can speak to that, and what are the
It's,
main differences?
it's night and day.
Yeah.
So, business in India, I guess one way people look at doing business is a way of basically it's a win loss. It's I make money, that person loses money,
Yeah.
right? That's one way that people look at it. And it's very unorganized. There's a lot of corruption involved as well. That's
Yeah.
a part of doing business in India.
Yeah.
Whereas Canada, everything is extremely structured. I say it's too structured and it's too onerous, especially government related stuff when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to regulated, especially my industry being liquor retail is extremely regulated. And there are times that regulations here are sometimes even contradict with each other. Two different regulations will say two different things. And so it can be challenging. But yeah, it's extremely regulated in Canada. And I find that in Canada, there aren't that many great business opportunities. Whereas in India, there are so many different business opportunities, and
Right.
especially it being such a big market.
Yeah.
Whereas Canada, mostly business is dominated by large corporations. The
Mm-hmm.
grocery stores are all large corporations.
Right.
Your banks are all large corporations. Cell phone companies, same. Whereas in
Yeah.
India, you have smaller players, you have
Yeah.
middle players, you have the family-owned convenience stores, grocery stores.
Right.
You don't see those retail kind of opportunities here.
Right. I found that the effort result correlation is much higher in North America than it is in India. So you waste a lot of time in peripheral activities in India. I recently was talking to one of my guests who ran a business in India and then moved here while she was running the business, and how her perspective changed. I told her that I had more government agencies I was dealing with than I had employees, even as a new business. And just the way the infrastructure is, be it physical infrastructure, or we would waste a lot of time. Like if you do two meetings in a day, it's very successful in Bombay because it takes so long to get anywhere. But here, those challenges are not there, where you have to keep following up with your employees. You have to handle all these government agencies and these regulations which are from the British era sometimes. But here, the I think competition is much more for the same resources. Like, in India, the cell phone company, right? It's growing because people don't have cell phones. Here, they grow by taking each other's market share, right? So, in that sense, competition is a much bigger factor here, I feel. I also feel that I don't have the temperament to do business in India. Like, I would, same business, if I did it in both places, I would be more successful here. And now that I've done a business in Canada to some extent, and to US and in India, I definitely feel I would not be very successful going back. And like you said, the market is huge. There's tons and tons of money to be made, and the scale that India brings is unbelievable. There's no such economic opportunity in the world right now, provided you are able to work in that environment and kind of make
Yeah,
the.
I'm too ethical. I think I wouldn't survive over there.
I think it's not just about ethics. My parents ran a stockbroking company, and it's an industry which was rife with bad practices, and we chose to be ethical and not break any rules just because we could. And yes, we didn't grow as fast as everybody else, but it's not like we weren't able to survive. So, but 100%, you need to have a certain willingness to bend rules to really succeed if that's what you're going out for. But I think things like, GST, those have made a big difference in reducing the kind of the unorganized part of the system. My father-in-law has a small scale like cutlery manufacturing business, and like it would be a very high percentage of the income was not reported. There was no tax, nothing. But now, because they get the input credit, everything is reported. It's become a, what you call in India, white business, right? Like above board. Okay, for our listeners in India, you have white money and black money. Black money is the unreported income, and there's obviously no estimates, but it's as big as the white economy, if not bigger, right?
Yeah, but GST itself has brought its own challenges, right? Like there's so many different rates of GST that
Oh
need to be
yeah,
applied, and you cannot have one offset against the other. And now
yeah,
they're debating if they want to put GST on popcorn.
yeah. There
Is
was a
it a
big
sweet?
debate.
Is it a savory? What is it? Caramel popcorn. We can't figure that
Yeah,
out. You
yeah,
know,
there was, I think it was to do that luxury goods are taxed at a higher rate because rich people can afford to pay more tax. And salted popcorn was considered something that middle class people can afford, but caramel popcorn was a luxury. So in the same movie theater, the two popcorns at the same price were being sold at different
it's
prices.
splitting atoms, my friend. Not
Yeah,
splitting hairs. Splitting. Why are we doing it? So why can't we make it a bit simpler? Have it one rate
yeah.
like every other country in the world.
I agree. Popcorn GST. I'm gonna see if I can find some like an explainer video about that whole thing and post it as part of my show notes. So if there's a new immigrant coming in, and I know my friends Veer and Juhi, who came in and then ended up buying a business and run that security camera. So Juhi was actually the first guest on this podcast. It's not for everybody to do that because most immigrants come in with the horizon of doing a job. But if someone has those bigger dreams and wants to go do a business but doesn't have 10-year history in the country, or like the credit score to go with it, or the financial resource to go with it, what advice would you give someone like that to get their foot in the door?
I think the best way to get around to it is if you first come and work in Canada for somebody else,
Yeah.
right? Get a job. hopefully if you can get one in your field, right?
Yeah.
Once you do that, you learn how things work in Canada.
Yeah.
Once you have sufficient experience, then you can build contacts within the industry that you're in and see what other opportunities are out there, or just do some look for something completely different, because depending on what your profession is, there might not
Yeah.
be a self-employment opportunity there.
Yeah.
But I think as a professional, if you're an accountant, or you might have opportunities to become like a service oriented business,
Yeah.
but you have to have some kind of specialized skill for that, right? So you need to
Yeah.
be either an accountant, an engineer, a software programmer, you could be a consultant, right?
Yeah.
But in terms of retail opportunities, like what I say is, retail business is for people that have no other specialized skills. So retail is an easy business to do, like a blue collar business, not a lot involved,
Yeah.
right? But there are not many of those opportunities. I find franchises are something that you should probably keep away from. They're to benefit the franchisor, not the franchisee. I've
Yeah.
had experience. Our gas station was one of those experiences that we had, and that's when we realized that we didn't want to be in a franchise business. They want to try and keep you there and work for them essentially,
Yeah.
and you don't get to grow.
I see a lot of new immigrants come and start businesses that service other new immigrants. For example, importing Indian snacks, right? In Canada, the Indian diaspora has mostly been Punjabi, and now it's diversifying. You see a lot of Gujaratis, a lot of other North Indians, Marathis coming. And with that, some kind of trickle down effect happens where some of those people become entrepreneurs and then they start serving their community and bringing food from their part of the country. Or I mentioned this in one of my episodes. There's Geeta Vada Pav in Vancouver. I don't know her personally, but she came in, she was selling vada pavs from her home. And I'm going to include a link to what a vada pav is in our show notes. It's the greatest food ever invented, in my
Does she
opinion.
now have a store in New Westminster?
Yes, that's the
I
one.
think I know her. Yeah, I
Yeah.
know of the store. Yeah,
I think we ate her vada pavs on New Year's Eve last year.
I think we did. Yeah, we
Yeah.
did.
Yeah. So I'm seeing that as a like a easy low hanging fruit that other new immigrants do for business. But I think what you're doing is in a different league and requires a lot more like local experience, local networks, contacts, because then you can't be restricted to your immigrant community as most new immigrants end up doing. They land in a place where there are other people like them, and then they have a shared experience that they kind of all live in, because your network would be much broader than that. You would be interacting with mainstream Canada, for example, and that's necessary to build something which requires capital and of that scale, right?
So speaking of mainstream Canada, I'll give you my example. So the first liquor store that I bought, right? And I had a manager in the business too,
Yeah.
but the manager was there to train me on how to run the business. I had no intentions of running that business, but I still
Yeah.
needed to learn how to run it.
Yeah.
So in case he left, or just for my knowledge, it's my business. So, anyways, and joined the industry association for liquor stores, and I attended my first meeting. And when I attended this meeting, this is back in 2012. This industry was origin. It has its origin from the publicans, original publicans, so people that own pubs. In the
Okay.
70s, pub licenses was a big thing back in the 70s, and pubs were very profitable. And so I went to this meeting, and so all these old publicans who now had liquor stores were also at the meeting.
Yeah.
And so it was all predominantly Caucasian,
Yeah.
middle to late ages, like in their 50s to their 70s. And I was the only South Asian
Yeah.
kid in his late 20s in that meeting.
Yeah.
So I was totally out of place in that one. But you know what? You just learn to kind of navigate that environment.
Yeah. So, right now I have a property management company and it's also a predominantly white profession. When I go to the property manager association meetings, I'm the only brown person there. And but when it comes to the customers, I have found my background to be an advantage because in our market, a lot of the property owners are from South Asia. A lot of the tenants who work for Amazon or Microsoft are from South Asia. And the fact that I have corporate experience and Amazon experience is also a shared experience with many people because then they learned I'm an Amazonian. They're like, oh, what team were you in? And we become friends. And I have clients from like African backgrounds. I have Asians, white people, all sorts of clients, right? So I've found that once you break in, if you're doing a good job, this part of the world will generally support you and you keep growing. The competence then becomes more important than your background, right?
That, and also it's important to break out of your comfort zone. So if you're only
Yeah.
comfortable being around people that are immigrants,
Yeah.
that's not going to help you. You have to be able to get out and mingle with people from other cultures. Like breaking into a good old boys club, it's not easy. Things are significantly different now. When you go to an industry association meeting, they're the minority. Like the old
Yeah.
boys are the minority, and
Yeah.
predominantly a lot of South Asians have gotten into this business
Yeah.
since then,
But
especially Punjabis.
so I'll add another dimension to that. It's important to not only have friends from your part of the world, it's also important to have friends who are a different tenure in the country. So the diversity can be in terms of new versus old. And, in our first month, we met you guys in that barbecue. And I had Chef Karan in one of the episodes earlier, and we talked about this. The fact that we were surrounded by all of you who had been there for 15 years, the conversations were completely different. You were talking about things that we would talk about in India as long-time residents of Bombay, right? We were in Bombay, we are not talking of like struggling to find a job or like our PR or whatever. And neither did you because all of you had been there for so long. So it was a very different perspective. And that immensely benefited our mindset in our early days. Because if I were hanging out with other new immigrants who came mainly for economic reasons, they would say, oh, Canada Post is hiring, or like Amazon warehouse is hiring. But
Yeah.
with all of you, we got validation that no, you're educated, you've been around the world. Don't just go do any survival job just because that's what everybody else is doing. Wait and find the right opportunity. And at least Prachi definitely found that with that medical cannabis company. Yeah.
You mentioned this, and I'm curious that you were able to see the bigger picture, and you could see these other opportunities. Like you could see people that have been here for longer, and like maybe further ahead in the life cycle. I don't know
Yeah.
if life cycle is the correct word, but on the
Yeah.
ladder, right?
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if that same opportunity is available to people who come to the country now. I don't know
Yeah.
if it is.
And that's one of the reasons I started the Diasporaa platform in Canada is to speed up people's assimilation and all the benefits that come with the assimilation. But actually as a step zero, tell people why the assimilation is required and why you should have gone to a hockey game, why you should have gone for a hike and gone to networking events in downtown and why you have to step out of Surrey, right? And see the bigger picture. On that note, since this is a newish show, I my audience is still getting to know me better. So I asked this question to some of my guests. What were your first impressions of us at that barbecue when you met us for the first time?
Honestly, I felt you were a bit reserved. You didn't really talk much. That's all that I remembered when I met you the first time.
Yeah, we were maybe, like when you don't know a lot or you can't participate in the conversation, you listen more. Like my dad says, you have 2 ears and one mouth, so you should listen twice as much as you talk. On that note, let's move into our weekly segments and end the episode on a lighthearted note. Let's spin the wheel and see where we land. So this one is called How's That? Most people from our part of the world have a favorite cricket moment and which they remember distinctly everything about, even though it was 25 years ago. So what's your How's That moment?
I could go with the cliche and the most commonly mentioned one, the MS Dhoni 6 in 2011 Wankhede, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go with my first memory of watching the 1992 World Cup in Australia. I used to
Mm-hmm.
wake up with my dad at 4 a.m. to watch and watched all the teams wearing colored clothes and playing
Yeah,
cricket. And I was like,
yeah,
I was awed. I'm like, wow, this is
yeah,
cricket.
yeah.
And I remember the Ajay Jadeja diving catch.
Oh yeah, I remember that. So I started watching cricket in '96 with that World Cup. I literally remember what teams were in the semifinals and whatnot. And I had a guest from Sri Lanka, and we talked about the India Sri Lanka semifinal in the '96 World Cup, which is another match that people where Vinod Kambli cried and they were throwing
Oh, that's right.
bottles.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
in
yeah,
Calcutta. That's right.
yeah. But the Dhoni six moment, right? I was in Bombay at the time. You can see the stadium about 3 miles away
I was in
from
Bombay too.
yeah from my window, and because there's a few second lag, the bowler was still going on the run up before that six, and we saw fireworks coming from the stadium. So we had like a 3 second advance warning that we won the World Cup.
Oh,
Uh,
spoiler.
3 second spoiler. Let's do one more segment. We have a little bit of time left. Let's spin the wheel. This one is called Lost in Translation. So, did you have any funny instances when you were brand new in the country because of cultural differences or language differences?
Yeah, so I only told you the first half of the story of my first day at school.
Yeah.
So when I got up to introduce myself, I actually did that. I introduced myself
Yeah.
and hi, my name is Imroz, and nobody got my name with my thick accent or so I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's I am ROZ. So I spelled it out for them. So they
Yeah.
thought I'm saying I am Rose. So
Okay.
ever since that day, people in school thought I was Rose. That's what my name was. And then later on, when they realized I wasn't the case, they would just make fun of me. I am Rose. Nice to meet you.
That's really funny. Well, that brings us to the end of today's episode. Thank you for listening to Diaspora. We hope you enjoyed hearing Imroz's interesting story. Remember to check out our show notes for links and more information about the topics we discussed today. Diaspora is part of the Staying Power network of shows and podcasts, all of which are dedicated to inspiring listeners to build lives of meaning, connection, and value. You can find the Staying Power network of shows, including Diaspora, wherever you get your podcasts or even on YouTube. We'll be back next week with another interesting story from the South Asian diaspora. Until then, take care and stay curious. And Imroz, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.